Hello to you, wonderful and beautiful soul beings. How are you today? I'm coming to you for this week's wonderful newsletter, and just wanted to touch base on how it is that we, as beings, first and foremost, can, you know, come to understand ultimately what it takes to understand more about our purpose and our meaning here in this life. And a lot of this has to do with that we're all coming to understand and know that um, as we traverse this continuously, we are always seeking to make choices that present us with those feelings that assist us in wanting to feel better each day, every day. If not, for ourselves to be able to live that, that more grandiose type of life that we all seek, that we all know that is possible. And the first thing that I can I can speak to here is understanding exactly where you are. We all start from somewhere, and mine began a long time ago. And I've spoke to this before, and I'll speak to it again here, just to give you a general idea as to where I began, so that it may hopefully give you a starting point as well. I had this one day when I was 32, right before I turned 33, that I sat down and I looked at where I was at, and I was angry. I was angry because what I was given as a foundational piece, so to speak, coming into this world was not the best. I knew this because of the things that I was experiencing, the feelings and the emotions that it was affecting the outcomes of a lot of the experiences I was having. And in that recognition, just, that being angry, that it seemed as though that I thought I had what I needed and it just wasn't working. And sitting there on that couch and recognizing that the way I was feeling was not what I wanted. I knew that it was so much more. That I knew that this was not meant to be the way that it was going for me. And sitting on that couch, having that anger, and looking around myself and seeing what I was seeing, I was like, yeah, no, this is not for me. And from that moment, I made a choice. And I had one of two to make: either continue to sit there and allow myself to keep going in the direction I was headed, or provide myself with what was needed to begin to build the foundation that I knew at least I had a little more of a chance and opportunity to, you know, um, utilize, to see what worked and what didn't work. So from there, I just set out. I said that this is it. Um, this is for me. This is for me because no matter what was taking place and what was happening up to that point, when I began, I felt I knew who I was. But by the time I hit that moment where I was sitting in that living room, I had no clue. I ultimately had no clue, because at that moment in time, I didn't recognize and realize how much I had been influenced in being told who I was. So I set out on this beautiful journey of rediscovery, of the exploration of who's Norma Jean? Who's Norma Jean in all this? And in that, I I changed a bit of the environment that I was in at the time, because I was living in the country, in these small little towns on the outskirts of, the small little suburban areas. And I was like, I'm going to challenge myself. Let's see this what this new venture has to show me. And the next thing I knew, I was living in the city. I moved from the country to the city of Atlanta. And, at the time, I was like, what am I doing? Um, this is so definitely unfamiliar territory. And it was also new. At least, the environment that I was in was new to me. And that environment, even though there were times it was like, am I going to get through this? Am I going to really be able to keep continuing to push myself with this environment that was so different and so new for me, to begin to really recognize, what it was that it was showing me at the time, everything that I was asking for, whether I was aware of it or not. And mind you, I do know not all of you can move like in that. I'm giving you where it was I began, what began it, and in what I got from it. So do understand, this is just me explaining to you what was the choices I made to end up in this new environment, in this new place. So moving there, the mentality was so different. It was, one of those where I'd heard about it, but it hadn't really, experienced that dog eat dog kind of mentality, so to speak. And this was, I would say, probably about the beginning, because this was in 2008. So in the 90s and stuff, I was living a lot of my youthfulness, just having fun, figuring that I was being, as much as I could, the being I felt that I was. And just traversing, understanding my interaction with other people. So as I'm in Atlanta, it was already one of those that I'm already there on one journey, but didn't realize and recognize that this was also a journey within a journey, so to speak. So living in Atlanta, I met a lot of people. They definitely give me a lot of contrast, in understanding that I wasn't just seeking just to know myself, but in that seeking to know self and who I was, I began to understand that by way of understanding how to recognize them. Because at that time, it was one of those that it really wasn't the mirror reflection concept or understanding at that time of what I was doing. As much as I could, I allowed myself to be guided in the experiences that I was having. And I had profound ones. I had ones that were impactful, on the, that double-edged sword, that level of the ups and downs. I grew a lot, and I grew a lot in 8 years. I guess you would say I kind of wouldn't say warp speed, but I definitely was given, everything that I was needing at the time for self, to know who self was. And in a lot of that, I was still weaving in and out of losing myself, finding parts of myself I didn't know about, and weaving back into, shedding these things that I knew that, as the process of what I was going through was showing me things, I was able to shed things a little simpler, a little easier, but just due to recognition of my interaction with other people. So, but the most significant thing that I did while I was there was I had to understand that I had to recognize that the one thing that I was always doing was showing other people kindness, where I so much wasn't showing that to myself. And in that recognition, I was like, hold up, wait. I can't forget about me. I can't forget that I'm part of this. I'm here too. And even though there were times that I felt like, there were times of that people were playing roles that were showing me things about myself that I felt invisible. And in that feeling invisible, or, those times that I felt so uncomfortable in places that I felt that and thought that I could call a home, were probably the places that taught me the most. And the people that taught me those beautiful lessons, although when you're in it, you're in it, and you can't see that beauty, but what it is that that's what it teaches us. When you're in it, it's hard to see the beauty in some things as we're getting to know who we are, as we're traversing this and trying to find that balance just here alone, much less within ourselves. So by the time I left Atlanta, which was about, I'd say 8 to 9 years later, I'd learned a lot about myself. I got to know who I was at that point as much as I could, given the beautiful contrast that was provided for me by taking myself out of an environment that I was so, accustomed to and was comfortable with, and put myself in a place where I was challenged so much that I didn't give myself a choice but to know and continue to seek more about who I was. And in that, I am so profoundly grateful for that. I'm grateful for that because I thank myself for that, because I put myself out there in ways that, most, we're so afraid not to. And it's okay. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have such fear, but the one thing that I came to recognize was that for the most part, the fears that I held weren't mine. They were fears that I recognized that I picked up because of, close family members. And so when I began to recognize the beauty of the mirroring of what other individuals play for us, that's something that even took me in and propelled me even deeper into the recesses of who I am. And while I was in Atlanta, another thing was that I provided myself with my own tools, and in that, I did the best I could in utilizing those tools for my own guidance. And I read a lot of books. I went to events that, shifted or was able to give me a perspective I've never had before. Because at that time, spirituality was in that kind of like in between stage. What is spirituality? It goes against Christianity, or this was just a time in period of the life that I was living that there was so much controversy in so many areas that it was I was just willing to open my mind to whatever it was that life was willing to bring into my space in the environment that I was in at the time. And I just took that and I allowed it just to show me stuff. And in that's when I came to understand that I became a great observer, not of just my environment, but the environment is what helped me to understand how to observe my reaction, my responses to what was going on in my immediate space, given the environment that was around me. And I began to be able to understand more about myself by recognition of others in what they were presenting with me, what they were speaking to, whether actions, corresponding and relating to what it was they were speaking to, if it was or if it wasn't, becoming very keenly aware of that. I became more keenly aware of who I was by recognizing what I was doing was my words matching what I was performing or what I was enacting? So when I begin to understand that, that's when I begin to know that the words that I speak is so vitally important. And in all those tools I provided myself, a lot of it was reading a lot of books. And in that, understanding how words are actually utilized. In that, recognizing that they're specific words that have many meanings to them, and having to work through those definitions given to that one word and utilizing it in a proper way. So when I began to recognize that, I began to speak differently to myself, even though at this point I didn't realize how much it was affecting how my body was responding to me. Because at that point, it was kind of like I could only do one thing at one time, and it was just to recognize patterns about myself. And so as you go along, begin to understand self by observation. Observation tells you a lot, because your environment seeks to give you what it is that you ask for every time. Every time, even if you're aware of what you're asking for, or if you're not, because even the ones that are not, it will come to you. Give it time, because you'll see. You're like, oh, I remember that thought. It was just so fast. So as you go along, understand you're no different than anyone else out here. By way of understanding that we're all going through the same process. And in that process, what we have a tendency to do sometimes is, when we interact with others, the one thing I recognized and realized that I was doing was I was speaking more to how they were responding and reacting than I was my own. And I'd be like, what is wrong with them? What is it about them? And then I began to realize and recognize, hold up. What's wrong with me? What am I doing, and what role am I playing that's either making what is transpiring worse or better, or at that in between where it's a pendulum. And in that, recognizing that the pendulum was within me as well, I begin to become more aware that when I would be in an environment that promoted situations where there was interactions, I was more about being more aware of, what am I being? How am I feeling? What's important to me in what I present here? Because I can't change who someone else is being, because I recognize the same thing is going on with them. That's what's going on within me. So when I begin to have these conversations with myself, even though I didn't have this great dance that I have now, I begin to, I guess you would say, build the dance floor. So I guess you would say my first foundation was a dance floor. Maybe even my first foundation was the floor that held the table for the two to come to, so that way we had the meeting place to, have those, those inward conversations with ourselves, where that something else is there, but all is the dueling aspects of things, without understanding that for the most part, most of it is contrast. So I began to understand I had to stop blaming everyone else for how I was feeling, and understand that I was the one that was creating the feelings I was having because of my response and reaction. And in that's when I began to understand that's how I changed the difference between the foundation I was given, which wasn't solid to begin with, to the foundation that I was set out to begin to build for self. And in that, I begin to be kinder to myself. I begin to have those conversations on a kinder level with myself and understanding that, okay, I have this tug and pull. I have this tug and pull. I have this in and out of sway of my emotions and how I was feeling, that I know I'd be happy and be sad. I'd be happy. I'd be sad. So, it's like understanding how the oceans come in as waves. And that tug and pull from the sun, or not the sun, the moon. And knowing that, hearing throughout, my life about what the moon and how it affects the earth, and understanding, that through the books that I read. The one thing that I know that I gave myself was a chance and opportunity to provide myself with the tools that continued to give me what it was that I was on this exploration and journey to come to know to begin with, and that was self. And so what I give you here is always know that you're doing the best you can from where you are. And to always remember that you must be kind to yourself. Because that's the thing, is that you can't always look for somebody else to be kind to you, because you don't know if they're being kind to themselves. And until we know something for self first, we're not going to be able to recognize it in another. So if you're speaking kindly to yourself and you're not complaining about what's going on in your life, you're taking responsibility and understanding that you play a role in what takes place and transpires in your experiences. That's when you begin to understand that we all are doing this. We are not separate in that. We all have a level and degree of influence from, the very thing that we were born into. And we can't always be that individual that comes across others that may already have this figured out in our lives. Because I know at that time, there wasn't many of them. There was very, very few. And when I did have that interaction, I was grateful for it, because they taught me something that I knew that I could be, because they were being it. And in that recognition, in understanding that, in that being it, I knew that if they could, that had to exist in me as well. I just had to seek it within, because I knew I wasn't going to get it out here so much in my environment, because we were all there. So as I go along in this, I just begin to understand that I get to create my reality. By the way, I understand how I'm feeling. I'm recognizing habits that I may be still performing that I feel that I can break if they're not habits that are propelling me in my understanding of self, or propelling me to become better, because they are showing me that there's something about myself I want to improve upon. And in that, I knew that I had to quit looking at things and saying, why is this happening to me? To understand that it was ultimately always happening for me. So this is all a process. You're not behind. It's not a race. You don't have to know it tomorrow, because of course Rome wasn't built in a day. But there's also the understanding that Rome wasn't destroyed in a day as well. It takes time, people. And in that time, you gotta have that patience with self. Patience is a virtue, but patience also teaches you kindness. It teaches you understanding. It teaches you how to recognize things that we sometimes aren't able to when we're in those knee-jerk reactions, when we're in those environments. But as we continue to understand, to give ourselves the understanding, I got to have patience for myself, because it wasn't until I started learning and applying as best I could my understanding of patience for self did I begin to understand that I was able to, excuse me, begin to recognize in a moment of whatever was taking place in my experience, where I was about to have a knee jerk, I'd stop myself and I'd, whoa. just because this is happening doesn't mean it's because of me. But just because this is happening doesn't mean it's to me either. This is someone else expressing because they're having a difficult time. So, and then I began to understand and recognize and begin to see the beauty of interaction, that I knew that once I started giving something to myself, for myself, that I was able to understand how to begin to apply that in a way where I was able to take that energy and shift it, because I shifted it within me first. So I feel that at this point, I hope that I have given you enough information to give you a starting point. Please bear with me, because as I've come to the place that I've come to now, to be able to find a good format that allows me the ability to give this information, or to convey this message in ways where there seems to be more of a fluidness to what I'm conveying. So please remain patient with me, because the only thing that I'm here to do is provide you with the tools or the guides in getting to know that you are worthy. You are of value. You do deserve a life without all this chaos, without all this what seems to be, this pressure. And that the way for you to understand that is the way in. Because this is where you are first. Because you are energy first. That's what has brought you here in this body. This body right here is the vessel, is the ship, is the the very thing that animates the life that you are. And as time goes by, and as time goes on, and as you continue more and more to embody the understanding of self first, the more and more you embody more of you to know what this right here ultimately and profoundly represents. Understand that we all are starting from somewhere. But the beauty and the most important thing is you've begun. No matter where it was from, where it's at, if it's been 2 or 3 years, if it's been 20 or 30 years, it doesn't matter. Even if it's just 2 minutes ago, you've begun. And that's all that's important. Because somewhere in that you've found that you are worthy of knowing self. Because you're there. You're there. You're not your thoughts. You're not the conditioning or the manipulation or the propaganda or the narrative. You're none of that. You are none of that. You are so much more. And the profoundness of the understanding, when you come into this, the more and more you give yourself that time to just sit and reflect, or to meditate, or to do something that brings you joy, that allows you that chance and opportunity to have those conversations, because you see, this is what's important. This right here. Because this is your meeting place. Because you're bringing this body that holds the masculine and feminine to the table up here to meet the being that surrounds this vessel. See, this is your meeting place. This is where the three meet, the mind, body, spirit. So be kind to yourself. Love you. Know that when you begin to give yourself that time, even if it's just for 2 to 5 minutes a day, you've begun. And I promise you, I give you my word. Forget promises. I give you my word that when you start putting time into self, you begin to grow the value of self. Then what happens is you break that down that you didn't know existed, and that currency begins to flow. You begin to have a fluidness in how you sit down with yourself, how it forms, how it is that when you come to the table to figure out how it is that, or to come into mastering, knowing what it's going to take for it to become at a level where the balance of the center becomes more of a beautiful dance over time. So I wanted to jump on here, and maybe this was a little bit longer than I anticipated, but there's something very vitally important to this message. And in that message, it's get to know you, because you're there. The beauty of who you are is there. Go find you. Go find you, so that you may recognize the ones who have done it for themselves as well. Know that we have, when Tanya and I had our 1, 2, 3, ABC 1, 2, 3 video, we've set everyone up with a challenge for this month. And they say it takes 21 to, I think, believe 27 days to change a habit. So I still present you with that challenge. I present you with a challenge to change the way you speak to yourself. For when you do this, you change the way you speak to others. I challenge you to not complain about your situation, because the situation changes because you quit complaining about it. I challenge you to listen to hear someone and where they are, and not reply or respond, so that you may understand where you are, and to hear where you are, and to listen. For the one thing that I came to understand as well is, even when I felt I couldn't give it to myself, I did make sure. I did everything I could to make sure I could give it to another. For I knew if I could give it to another, I could figure out mastering what it would take to do it for myself. And begin to take this challenge and replace it with the things that propels you. Replace it with words of encouragement. Replace it with words of love. Replace it with words that strengthens you. Strengthens the bond you are creating with self. To know self. And know that you got this. We all do. All of us are doing this at our own pace and our own rate, from where we are at the level at which we are coming from. But the more and more you allow yourself this time, give yourself this time, empower yourself with whatever it is that states that I am going to be the one that controls my reality. I am going to be the one that controls how I feel by making choices that will give me what it is I seek to know about self, so I can improve self. Even if that means sitting down and read a book. If that's what you love to do, oh my God, please read a book. If you love to listen to music, listen to music. Change how you feel if you can't change what you're thinking. Because sometimes it takes changing the vibratory state before you can change the frequency of the radio, the thoughts. Do the things that bring you joy. Do the things that puts you in that place or space where you are sitting with self. Even if it is cleaning house. And man, I'm probably one of the most tidiest, if not, I won't say greatest cleaners, but the one thing I recognized was I love to clean. And the reason why I love to clean is because it puts me in a meditative state. See, I don't do meditation the way that, some of us are, some people can sit down and do meditation in that level or in that state. I can't. I haven't gotten to that point of understanding if that is even a part of something that I will implement later on. But where I found that I could get into a meditative state was in the very thing that I was just cleaning. I would clean, and when I was cleaning up my environment, I began to understand that my environment outside of me, something would reflect what was going on within me. So even if I couldn't get to that place of clearing the clutter that I felt that was in me, I would begin to do it out here. And as I began to do it out here, I began to realize, oh, hold up a minute. There's something to this. So do you understand? Do know. You got this. Do what it takes to understand that you are the one that has the power to create the reality you seek to experience. Empower yourself every day, in every way, or any way that strengthens that bond you begin to have with self. And know that we are here. We're here to do what we can to assist you in this. So, I want to stop right here and let you know that you are loved, you are seen, and be who you are. For I'm not here to take that from you, because we do that enough to ourselves. Enjoy your week, and know that support will always be there in our Telegram group as best as it can be provided, given that there's a lot going on here as far as the things that I'm in a creative process of doing, as well as TANJA. So do know, we see you. We see you, and we know you, and we are honored that you are here with us, and we so look forward to being a witness to seeing you become, seeing you flourish in who you are. Have a great week. We'll talk to you later.